三分天下事，天下事说三分。大家晚上好，我是 Andrew 安德鲁。那么在今天的三分天下事呢，可热闹了。为什么呢？在这个节目里面呢，我们首先呢非常荣幸的能够邀请到纽西兰的教育部长 Nikki Kaye 来到这个节目。Hello
Nikki。Hello, hi。
那么另外呢，还是有大家非常熟悉的华界非常熟悉的华人国会议员杨健。
大家好。
那么在我左手边呢，当然老朋友了，中文新区报的主编叶涛。
大家好。
那么在接着下来的短短的45分钟呢，我们将会呢就是采访到我们的教育部长 Nikki Kaye 以及呢杨健博士，他们对于纽西兰的一些教育方面的一些体制啊，还有对于大选接近来临啊，他们有一些什么想法，有些什么看法等等呢，我们再接着下来一一为大家分享。Welcome to the program, Ms. Kaye. First of all, I think we can take this opportunity to let our Chinese community to know a little bit about you, because in the past, all right, from what I've heard, Nikki Kaye, beautiful, young.
Oh, that's very nice.
All right, hey, young, and of course, last year we heard about you go through a bit of health issues. So how are you feeling now?
Oh, I feel really good actually. I mean, it's been a pretty tough journey, but it's been amazing to be back. And to be back as not only the MP for Auckland Central, but Minister of Education. It's been awesome.
You've been.
I've been very lucky to have great support from my colleagues like Jean, but also the former Prime Minister John Key and Bill English have been amazing. They've been awesome.
Isn't it hard, to be a Minister of Education at the same time? You have heavy workload, and at the same time, you have to look after yourself. How do you manage to do that?
Well, I think I've got a lot better at that, and part of that's been by necessity, because when I got sick I had to reevaluate life quite massively, but also I've learnt to build a really good team and to delegate more, and I certainly think I'm a much better minister and member of parliament, ironically, as a result of getting sick. So it is a busy time. I say to people, I've got 4 jobs: Minister of Education, MP for Auckland Central, the National Spokesperson for Education, yes, and then the candidate for Auckland Central. But I have been in Parliament now for 9 years, and so I'm more experienced than ever before. So there's a lot of things that aren't new, and so that is easier than other candidates probably.
And you definitely need a very good team to support you all the way. We see that, like lately we see the New Zealand society as a whole talk a lot about Jacinda Ardern's leading the Labour Party. I remember the 48 hours once that decision came out, a lot of people really query about her age, her experience. But now, honestly, we have the Minister of Education, Nikki Kaye. She's a young lady. How did you manage to do it? Before you joined the politics, what were you doing?
So I was elected pretty young. So at 28, I took the seat for the first time in the history of New Zealand politics for the National Party, and I knocked on 10,000 doors. But before that, I had been a Bachelor of Science in Genetics, a law degree. I had worked in London, both consulting and transport, but also a bank. But I think in terms of my career, and I've fought Jacinda twice for the seat of Auckland Central, just really hard work. I mean, I think I am representative of a lot of Kiwis, including my experience of a lot of Chinese Kiwis, who just work really hard, treat people well. This is what I say to a lot of young people: have courage and respect. And that's been how I've sort of been able to get into this position.
Was being into politics, was it your original wish? Have you ever thought of, like, if it's not politics, were you now maybe you're the CEO of a big large firm, or
maybe a lawyer?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I didn't. When I was younger, my parents were not political. I consider them swinging voters, and I didn't really know that much until I got involved. I sort of got involved at about 19, and I realised that I always wanted to help people. So if I wasn't in politics, it would be charitable more likely. And I went over to London, but was working in the private sector, and I was earning more money than I earn now as a cabinet minister. But it's not what drives me. So I think what I have learnt is that my life will always be serving people and helping people. And I just believe that while politics can be tough and you can be in the spotlight, you have more opportunity than ever before to help people, and that's what I love.
Okay, let's talk about your portfolio as the Minister of Education. It's very important, and I believe our viewers, a lot of parents, families, it is it's not only the Asian, but I guess it's like majority of the parents, they really focus on their children's education. This morning, when I thought of what am I going to ask the minister, there's one thing, all and a sudden while I was reading my mobile phone, hey, there's something I can ask. I say, we are living in a new era, all right? Computer, electronic devices, all right? And it is very easily accessible, especially kids nowadays, they start from very young, computer, which never happened to us before, all right? My question is, while we are picking up all this new technology, at the same time, are we actually missing some of the very valuable traditional teaching methods? Are we?
Look, I think there are several things going on. So if we just sort of step back and look at where New Zealand's education system sits compared to other countries and what's happening with technology and the jobs that will exist in the future. You've got a couple of things going on. The first is New Zealand has done very well with our top students, but we have always had this significant gap, particularly for Māori and Pacifica students. And what we know under our government is we've lifted achievement significantly. So we've got thousands more Māori and Pacific students leaving, being able to read, write and do maths. But we need to do more to invest in their, whether they have behavioural issues, whether that's about food, whether it's about transport, whether it's the actual quality of the teachers and the method of inquiry. We are very focused on that, and the reason that we've put in national standards, which the Labour Party are saying they're going to scrap, is that all that is about is being able to know where these children are and how they're doing, and particularly numeracy and literacy, reading, writing, doing maths, and we now know, and we're now pouring resource into that, and we're seeing a lift in achievement. So that we need to continue on that path. We cannot end up in a situation which the Labour Party are arguing for where we don't know where these kids are. And the second thing is then how much time is being spent online and what does that mean in terms of focusing on those core subjects. And the thing that I've said, and I recently announced some changes to the curriculum around new technologies and a $40 million package to upskill teachers, is that there are young people who are online and they're not doing significant learning. There isn't significant quality teaching and learning going on. And that's why we need to put the right curriculum in place to not be just teaching digital use, but also young people to be digital creators. So that is this concept of computational thinking, so that young people in New Zealand, and this is where I believe we're leading the world in this particular area, will be able to, whether it's artificial intelligence or robotics, understand how to direct technology to do what they want in science and animation. And we have announced the draft new technology. I will, or the next minister, depending on what happens at the election, gazette that later this year, and we will invest $40 million upskilling teachers to be able to deliver that. So, to conclude, I'm confident that we have a plan that focuses not only on every child being able to learn those foundational skills of maths, being able to read, being able to write, but also being digitally fluent. So we need to do both, because 50% of the jobs that exist now may not exist in 20 years' time.
That's right.
I got a question.
Yes.
We all know that we're coming from China mainland.
Yes.
We all know that. So in China we have a quite different, education system.
Yes.
Do you have any idea, how that system works, and what sort of advantage New Zealand system can learn from that?
So I think a couple of things in terms of differences. We have a very flexible curriculum in New Zealand, so it enables in local areas you to teach very much local content. We obviously require young people to be able to learn those foundational skills, But there's a lot of variation, and that's because we have very diverse communities from rural to urban areas. We're seen as world leading for that reason, because the content and knowledge doesn't stand still, it evolves over time. Where I think in Asian countries there has been probably commentary in terms of the favourable aspects of systems is that you do spend a lot more time in terms of more formalised learning, and probably more testing.
Yes. More hard work.
Again, what I would say is we have to do a balance of both. Yes. We need to make sure in New Zealand numeracy, read, write and do maths, but then also we know in the way the world is changing, those core skills of critical thinking, being able to problem solve, this whole concept of adaptability, which is very much coming through, and then these skills of computational thinking. We are being seen as leaders in providing an education system that can provide both those core skills but also those new 21st century skills.
I believe we have a lot of parents actually watching this program, and it is a fairly general perceptions, especially with a lot of newcomers. They don't really understand New Zealand education systems. When they migrate to New Zealand, they got their kids enrolled to the schools, and then the next step, hey, there's not much homework.
No,
there's no exams. No, the kids are having too much free time. I'm not sure about Dr. Youngjian's, maybe you have your kids, will you ever worry?
I'm actually quite worried because I got two kids when in the intermediate, when in the primary school, they basically have nothing to do at home. Maybe the older one.
They found out, hey, the kids say, hey, life in New Zealand is
they are
great.
happy.
Hey, there's nothing.
Then they never want to come back.
But I think the thing I'd say is when you look at the international sort of measures like PISA, while we slipped previously, we then have stabilised under our government, and we have risen in the rankings. We do well, as I said before, for some of our top students. So the concept that, oh no, everybody's just having too much free time, it doesn't quite measure up in terms of how we do in terms of top students. It's just this issue that we, in my view, have not had enough focus as a society on ensuring that all young people are meeting those basic standards, which may be the case more in other countries, it's less acceptable. So that's where we've got to focus. And I think the other thing that I'd say is, the nature of the way that the world is changing and those jobs, this ability to create things and the skills that are involved in that, given that machine learning is occurring, I think there's a very healthy debate to be had across a range of countries about what those 21st century skills are. And I feel like we are future-proofing our children to have both those core skills, because you can't access other areas of the curriculum like science unless you've got a good understanding of maths, but also these 21st century skills in terms of technology, more and more as well. Being able to connect with people, build relationships, some of those soft skills. And that's what a lot of businesses talk to me about as well, is that they absolutely need those basic foundational skills, but they also care about things like good communication skills, the ability to turn up on time. Yes. We're doing quite a bit of work in the careers area and how we might prepare more young people to be better in these areas. And that involves parents as well. But we're definitely interested in those soft skills as well.
Let me cut in. This is a very interesting question because for most Chinese parents, they believe that when the kids are young, they don't have enough homework. I was a lecturer before, so I could say that this is very different from Chinese way. In China, students are very busy before they go to university. Yes. But once in university, basically
free time,
quite relaxed. Now here, actually, it's getting harder and harder. Primary school, lots of time. I think it's good for kids to play, teamwork, all these things. And then secondary, harder, and then tertiary, university, very, very challenging. So I think that's a good way in terms of
progressive way.
Yeah, that's right.
Leading to a tougher.
But also more and more where we're focusing, and this is in part Bill English, our Prime Minister, has led this, is we know that early years are so important. So the foundations, if you look at all the OECD studies, the ability for a child to speak and listen, the ability for a child to control their behaviour, the ability for a child to be creative, all of these foundations, if they're not there, the chances of them being addicted to substances or not being able to read and write or being in prison. And so we have focused very much trying to increase the participation of young people in early childhood. But I think there will be more of a conversation if we are re-elected about the quality of those early years.
Okay, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about schools, fundings, decile, school zones, and all those questions. 我们稍作休息，待会回来三分天下事。欢迎再度回来，三分天下事，天下事说三分。那么今天呢，我们的主要的采访对象呢是纽西兰的教育部长 Nikki Kaye， 以及呢咱们的杨博士，还有呢这个中文先驱报的主编叶涛，有一连串的有关教育方面的问题呢，我们会趁着这个短短时间呢，尽量的提问啊，因为相信正在收看这个节目的很多朋友们呢，都非常关注纽西兰的教育体系，老师怎么了，学校怎么了，学生是不是太空闲了，等等一连串的问题，我们接着来问。Every year when it comes to May, we know there's the budget year, all right? Okay, every department wants money.
Yes.
All right, and money is never enough. My questions, do you believe that the schools in New Zealand, they have sufficient funding?
What we've said is we have to change our funding system, because at the moment there are some schools that have obviously the money from the government, but then they have other sources of income. And the reason that we have announced a big funding review, which is a once-in-a-generation chance to get our funding system right, is because we do accept that we think for some people, some schools, they just can't get there on their existing funding. And so this funding review is due to be complete by sort of early next year. And that's why we've been working on the decile system. That's one aspect of it. Every year that we've been in office, we've increased vote education. So we've gone from $8 to $11.6 billion. I think we have to do better to provide fairer and improved funding systems, and that will involve more money in some areas. But overall, we're pretty good as a country.
And I heard, and even in the mainstream media, that quite often there's kind of arguments. Are the kids actually enjoying a free education system or not? Because a lot of schools, hey, money is not enough. Parents pay
donations.
Yeah.
A bit of donations.
So if we look at the facts and the figures on this, average amount of donations is 1.8%.
Okay.
So we add everything up. So it's 1.8% of overall funding. So it's actually very small. The donations are voluntary. So no school can require a parent to pay that. From my perspective, I think what we're trying to work through in terms of the funding review is to determine what we actually think it costs to deliver the curriculum. So we don't think anyone's really done that before. We're dealing with very old systems and formulas around staffing, and that's one of the key big questions that we're asking. How much does it cost to deliver the curriculum? We then think there are issues around some rural and isolated schools. And then this question of, which is the decile, right?
Yes.
We've announced the scrapping of the decile. How do we fund where we know that there are numbers of children that are significantly at risk of not achieving? We have a lot of social service spend, everything from money to help with insulation of housing, money to help to get children into early childhood education. We have money in the budget, which is the decile money, to help schools, to help those children that might need more. But we want to shift to a more sophisticated or fairer system of funding that isn't based on the neighbourhood characteristics, that is more likely to give the right amount to schools so that they can invest in those children that may be at risk of not achieving. The other big issue with our education system has been, for a very small country, we've had 2,500 schools. So if you look across the world, they tend to have larger schools. That's a lot of schools, and we haven't been very good at sharing best practice and innovation. Some schools have done that. So what HECIA announced was a $360 million package to encourage schools to share best practice across schools, and we now have, they're called communities of learning. We now have 500,000 or 2/3 of schools in these communities of learning. The $360 million pays for not only principals but other teachers to be able to teach across schools and lift the quality of that teaching, because we know the single biggest difference that we can make in terms of a child's learning is around the quality of teaching.
Yeah. My younger son, Ethan, who is 8 years old, and
Yes.
now he is in a primary school, year 4.
Yes.
In his school, there used to be a very popular teacher, but last semester he left.
Yes.
Yeah, because of the pay he got is not enough for his living.
Yes.
Yeah, this is what he told the pupils.
Yeah.
They were very frustrated, and
Yes.
they don't happy about that. But we all know that this sort of problem is a national problem. There's a teacher shortage.
Yes.
So
So a couple of things there. In New Zealand, we have about 100,000 teachers, which is about the right overall number, but the problem that we have is shortages
yeah.
in
and the
certain
pay.
areas. Yep. So the shortages in certain areas are science and technology teachers, te reo teachers, but also in geographical areas. In Auckland, we've had some issues. So I've announced a raft of plans to try and address the shortages for those particular areas, everything from relocation payments for Kiwi expat teachers. We have a number of teachers in New Zealand who come from other countries for which the bureaucracy and the hoops are very large, so we're reviewing that. Voluntary bonding, we're expanding voluntary bonding payments so that for those teachers in Auckland that might say, well, we need greater incentives, they get $3,500 if they stay over the 3rd year, 4th year, $3,500. So we're using all of those tools. In terms of pay, under our government, the teacher pay has gone up on average about 17.5%. So there has been an increase. And then this $360 million enables new allowances to be paid on top of that. So the whole thing I'd say is we are paying teachers more. We have got other systems of allowances through the Investing in Education Success package. We are investing heavily on addressing those shortage areas in places like Auckland. But if we go the other way and we create too many teachers, then people can't get jobs. And what we haven't done adequately in New Zealand is have a decent workforce strategy, which is incredible really when I came into the role, that looks at how many graduates we have, where are the shortages, where do we need to up the things like voluntary bonding. And so we're also doing that work to deliver that as a strategy.
I was educated in Singapore actually, and I remember when I was in high school, my teacher actually came from Christchurch,
Yes.
English teacher. They started importing teachers from overseas, experienced, good quality teachers. Do you think New Zealand actually should follow something like that?
A few things. We've created this new body called the Education Council, which is absolutely tasked and focused with raising the quality of teaching, but also looking at these issues of supply. They are working with Immigration New Zealand and NZQA to look at this issue of how do we make it potentially easier for people from overseas to teach in New Zealand. We actually believe that we've got a number of teachers in New Zealand that are not registered. They've practiced in other countries, but because they found it too hard to get through the system.
Why is it too hard?
Yeah.
Well, the
Why is it too
balance is that we have had experience whereby our system is a bit different to other countries, and that understanding that New Zealand context, the flexible nature of the curriculum, we have to navigate a path that ensures we don't put people in classrooms for which they won't be able to be up to speed with the New Zealand education system, while making it easier for those people that might want to go through that process, both at a cost level and a time level, to get there. So it is a delicate path, because we have had some experience of some teachers from other countries for which in the past it's not worked out as well because it's such a different system. So we are doing a lot of work in this area. And in fact, I spoke to my colleague Melissa Lee last night about it. We have things like teacher refresher courses or mentoring. And I think it's going to be a bit of a process of maybe enabling some of those things to be used alongside some of these overseas teachers to get them over the line.
Yes, Ms. Kaye, you have mentioned a number of times about the system. Is it because what we are doing today, is it because our system is just too complicated to understand by overseas teachers? Or now, on one hand, we'd like them to learn and to adapt our systems, but on the other hand, don't you actually recognize that maybe it is time we change the systems?
Well, that's absolutely the conversation that we're having. So I've directed the core agencies of the Ministry of Education, NZQA, Immigration New Zealand, to come back to me with options for change. So I do believe there needs to be change. The balance is I have to work alongside the education sector in New Zealand to, one, make sure we're not displacing a whole lot of Kiwi teachers, which I don't think we are in certain areas, but then two, be absolutely confident of the quality of those people and that they understand the New Zealand context enough so we're not putting them in situations whereby they won't succeed. So we do believe there needs to be change. We've just got to go through a process around what that looks like.
If the National Party is going to govern after the elections, very soon we're going to see the DESO funding system is going to scrap and replaced with another one that I read was a risk
risk index.
Index. Well, what is it?
The first is now in New Zealand, we have very specific targeted support for individual students that may not be achieving. So it might be they get additional teacher aid hours, they might get behavioural support. The decile system has never been about providing individual support for a particular child and naming that child. It's always been about a generic pot of money that adds into a school's budget so that they can then be flexible to determine where the need is, whether it's transport, whether it's food in schools, whether it's teacher aid hours, so that they have that flexibility because they know where those needs are, right? That's what it's always been about.
And the amount of that budget is according to the social economics?
So the key things are, it's always been a small amount of money, so it's about 3% of the budget.
Okay.
The second thing is, it has been very crude and complex. So it's been based on the socioeconomic status of a neighbourhood, rather than, we know now more than ever before, by the data systems that we have, the profile of what is likely to be children that are more at risk of not achieving. So if their parents have had criminal offending, if their parents have been beneficiaries. So what we're doing is, and the problem that has occurred is that there will, children who might be at risk of not achieving, they move schools, they may be in a very wealthy area, but we haven't been funding those schools for what has been more likely their need. So what we've done is we've gone and we found, we've created a system whereby we think we will provide a fairer allocation of what the need is for schools based on that risk index. The information, what will happen is the student data will go into an anonymised and it will match against a range of different factors that the scientists and the researchers tell us mean that there's more at risk of not achieving. That will say, well, look, say to the schools there may be 13 students that are at risk of not achieving, so this is your funding pot. So it'll be much fairer, much more likely that is their need. But what we won't do is we're not going to say these are the 13 students, because they may not be. Children come from lots of different backgrounds and they do well for other reasons. This is about a fairer funding formula to better enable schools to respond to the different needs. It's not about labelling kids, and that's the other thing about getting rid of the decile. The reality is we want to change the culture as a country from parents looking at the decile number and thinking that is the quality of the school. The quality of the school is about the error in the Education Review Office information. What is the achievement of the school? What is the school's environment? And so we want to shift parents to be looking at that rather than a arbitrary number.
OK， 我们暂时休息一下，三分天下事，待会再度回来。三分天下事，天下事谈三分，欢迎来到三分天下事。那么前面2节呢，我们都谈到了，就是访问了咱们的教育部长 Nikki Kaye， 还有杨健博士杨议员。那么就谈到了这个纽西兰的这个教育的一些体系，让大家更能够深入的了解一下咱们现在的教育系统到底是怎么一回事，或者是在未来会面对一些什么样的一些改变或者是一些挑战。Ms. Kaye, there's one more question. Just recently, I heard the mainstream society has been talking. I don't know whether it's directly related, but what it says is because with the way the housing, the rental market is going on, a lot of families, they were forced to move around, okay, and that has a great impact on their children's education. Have you heard anything about it?
Yeah, we look very closely at transient figures actually, and the numbers actually haven't changed dramatically. In saying that, it's a very serious situation for any family that has to move as a result of housing. That's why I believe we have the most comprehensive plan in terms of housing. If you look at what's actually occurred over the last 20 to 30 years in Auckland where we've got major issues, the first thing is we priced a generation out of housing by having the metropolitan urban limits so small. So the biggest cost of housing in Auckland has been land because we haven't built up or we haven't had the space in terms of
the city council
land. Exactly. So the unitary plan is the single biggest thing that can help with that, and that's why we've got that through. We put the amalgamation of Auckland Council through because there's so many different planning documents. So we've now got the capacity for another 400,000 odd dwellings. The second thing is we've now tripled, I think, the number of houses that are being built under our government. We've pushed through, we've been very supportive, obviously, of the Resource Management Act reform. Again, the left talk about housing, but they oppose that. They were also not very happy with all of the amalgamation of Auckland. So we've put some very key things in place. The other thing is we've improved first home buyers subsidies, so we've done that as well. But I think the key things are we have to continue the construction. And so from my perspective, between the Home Start grants, the Resource Management Act reform, the freeing up of Crown land program, we're doing more than ever, and I'm confident this is a question of time. More than anything in terms of getting these houses built. The alternative is the Labour Party are saying they will build 100,000 houses. There's no real detail about where they will do that. The numbers don't add up. I mean, if you sort of think about it, we're now building 10,000 a year.
But Ms. Kaye, I need to interrupt you there.
Yes.
You know, the National has been governing the country for about almost 9 years.
Yeah.
All right. Is it really, in my memory, the housing becomes a very hot topic.
Yes.
Was only the last 2 to 3 years?
More than that.
A little bit more than
4
that.
5 years, yeah.
In all the time when John Key was leading the government, like all the time, seems like the housing is always, no, come on, it's a market issue, it will come up right. But is it too late?
Look, I
for the
think
National
if you look
rush
back,
into
I
the
guess my point
instructions?
would be is we haven't just started doing things on housing in the last couple of years. One of the single biggest things that we did, which was right early on when we were elected, is the amalgamation of Auckland and getting this unitary plan through, which actually enables us to go up, to build up, and also build out. So that is not just the last couple of years. That's the biggest single thing that a government could do. And then the second point that I would make is, from my perspective, the voters care about and people care about what are you actually going to do about it, right? So totally separate to the fact that I think we started this process of trying to fix Auckland. In terms of housing, this has been building for a long time because we just haven't had the land and we haven't had the planning rules to go up. They care about what you're going to do about that. And when you sit down with anyone in construction, anyone in planning, the reality is our Resource Management Act reform, our Home Start subsidy, what we're talking about in terms of, yes, we have a capital gains tax in New Zealand, the fact that we are happy in terms of construction to bring people in to build, that is a comprehensive, reasonable plan. The left wing, totally understand people might say you might have done it faster and all of these things. If you look at what they're saying, 100,000 houses, they're opposing immigration, right? So they're not necessarily enabling us to have the workers to be able to be here. They've opposed the Resource Management Act changes, which have actually enabled major consenting projects to happen. They've opposed developments like Point England. So I think from my perspective, people can quibble about whether we could have gone a bit faster, but ultimately we have a plan to, in my view, enable houses to be affordable, and it's detailed, and they don't.
Another 9 years?
What was that?
Another 9 years?
No, I think that there is no quick fix. Any politician that sits here and says this will be solved in a year or two, that's not right. There's a lot of construction in the pipeline, but you know, this is not about the last 10 years. This is about 30 to 40 years of not providing, being able to build up and build out. Things can get easier over the next few years, but it is not something that can be fixed in a couple of months.
Back to schools and education, I got a problem. Talking about a unitary plan, we all know that this can make Auckland higher and you know, more people living in the small area. But for these popular schools, people are worried about there are too many students in one school, and the school is going to be downsized.
So what we've done, again, a couple of things is there's never been a long-term plan around schooling provision for Auckland. And when I came in as Associate Minister, we're now working on a 30-year plan. So we have invested hundreds and hundreds of millions in new schools and more classrooms to make sure that we can future-proof education provision for the city for 30, 40 years. Part of the issue that we have in New Zealand is we enable schools to have the choice to enrol out-of-zone students.
Yes.
And so, one of the issues that you have is if people don't perceive a school to be as good as another school, then they all want to go to that school.
Right.
The Auckland Grammar is given an example of that. And what we say is because we want to have choice, we put mechanisms in place which say we won't fund those schools for property for out-of-zone children, to encourage them to say no, that actually we've got over-burgeoning populations in those schools. And the answer, in my view, is not only continuing to invest more to take this 30 to 40-year plan, so we've got spaces at many more schools, but it's also lifting achievement so that every school is seen as a good school. And that's part of the issue, is that you've had this gap in achievement between certain schools. And also, I think the decile system has contributed to that, because people have thought incorrectly that number of decile 1 means that the school is worse than it is. It's not going to be one single thing that will change that situation. We have to continue to invest in more. We have to plan for 30 to 40 years. We have to get rid of the decile system so people can see that every school is a school that's progressing. We have to lift achievement in every school to ensure the quality. That's what will make the biggest difference around not having people focused on this one school.
But ultimately, schools like Auckland Grammar, they're going to have face the problem that there are no enough capacity for the new in-zone students.
Yes.
So is the change of the...
I wouldn't agree with that in the sense of when we look at the numbers, right? We are building up now. So you take Newmarket School, it's four stories. There's lots of other countries for which that's what we have. I'm confident, because I've seen all the geospatial mapping, that while we're going to need about, I think it's another 20 to 30 schools in the Auckland area, we've got land in parts of Auckland. There are some areas like Central Auckland and potentially Epsom whereby we may have to consider more like Japan or Hong Kong, whereby it's a central city building. And we are definitely looking at that. But I do think for the majority of Auckland, and I announced this new policy called Metro Schools, where we are prepared to invest in recreational facilities inside the building. The majority of, we're only anticipating that might be 3 or 4.
So one thing I believe a lot of families would like to know a very straightforward, short answer is
Yes.
under national government,
Yes.
schools zonings will retain.
We will we have no plans to change the current system in terms of school zoning. The only thing I'll say is, so we're not campaigning on that at all. The one thing is, not just with Auckland, but also in Queenstown and Hamilton, the way that we manage growth generally is going to be an ongoing conversation. So we have no plans to change the school zoning.
But you're not ruling out either.
Well, I don't think you ever. Look, I think the reality is, as a politician, there are very few things that you say will always stand the test of time. I think it's highly unlikely because I think we have invested $5 billion upgrading schools and building for growth. That's the largest ever school capital upgrade program in history. We're going to be spending billions more, so there's no dramatic need to change the system.
Okay.
Yeah. Also about we all know that you're going to be the candidate for the Auckland Central.
Yeah, let's talk
electorate.
about
Yeah,
elections.
let's talk about that. So name 3 most important issues in this electorate.
Okay, so I have 12 local projects that I'm campaigning on, and some of them that I can name for you is a safer central Auckland. So we are investing more than $500 million more in police, so there'll be more police in terms of central Auckland. I'm campaigning on some environmental issues in terms of the Hauraki Gulf, so greater marine protection, pest-free Waiheke, because Waiheke covers part of my electorate. We've been doing a lot of work in terms of homelessness, for which we've had rough sleepers in central Auckland for decades, but we're investing in a program called Housing First, which is wraparound social support that's getting people off the street, so that's obviously a priority. We will be investing more in Auckland Central schools, so Richmond Road School is getting a redevelopment, Freeman's Bay School is in train. I could keep talking.
Dr. Youngjin
Yeah, so can I
mentioned to me the other day with regards to Albert Park.
Yes.
Yes.
The University Albert Park.
Yes, I was going to say that actually. That's one of the minister's achievements. She worked with the council and local stakeholders basically to make Albert Park brighter. And also some, I think, but the cameras they are not, I don't know.
Yeah, so we had some pretty terrible things happen in terms of students, and a lot of that, people were trying to cut through the park, and it was very dark, and obviously terrible things were occurring. So not only the student associations, but also obviously Consul, we had a number of people involved, particularly as well because there are a number of international students for which they didn't necessarily know that might be unsafe. So we've improved the lighting and worked on some of the camera work with the New Zealand Police. So it's been a good project.
The Auckland Central, well, in my opinion, Auckland Central is always one of the hardest electorate. Lots and lots of issues.
Yes.
Everybody wants to live close by.
Yes.
What are some of the major challenges, Ms. Kaye, that you can think of, in the next, let's say, in the next 3 years, that you need to deal with immediately?
Yeah. Well, as I said before, we will be doing more in terms of safety. We will be doing more in terms of homelessness. But from the longer term perspective, we're going to have 100,000 people living in central Auckland. Yes. So the whole waterfront area, the role of the port is very important that we get that right. Do we want to shift it? Do we not? So I am campaigning that there will be a feasibility study on that. The America's Cup is a huge opportunity to redevelop in that area, and that's important for the people want obviously to be living in a safe place, but they also want enjoyment in terms of those areas around the waterfront, but also Victoria Park. So I think that work and what the legacy of the America's Cup is also going to be very important. From my perspective as well, transport is crucial. So the CRL, Central Rail Link, we've worked with the council, $3.4 billion project. Having that delivered alongside the work we've done with Victoria Park Tunnel, is about getting rid of congestion out of the CBD and ensuring more people are getting on public transport. So that's a key area as well. The other thing that I would say is we have a lot of people living in central Auckland, this is my message in terms of the election, who don't know that they're eligible to vote. And we need people to understand that if you are a New Zealand citizen, but if you're a permanent resident and you've been living here longer than a year, you can be eligible to vote. You can turn up to an advanced polling booth and make a special vote if you haven't registered, or you can go online and register. But it's really important that people have their say. I mean, obviously I'm a little bit biased, but I really believe that Bill English is not only a great economic leader, he's seen as one of the best former finance ministers in the world, but he is very socially progressive. And he is the architect of what we call social investment and how we target more for our most vulnerable. And this is a crucial election. It will be very sad for our country, in my view, if we do not unleash one of the greatest social reformers that our country's had alongside the economic reform.
Okay, because we only have about 1.5 minutes now. This is the last question, so I'd like to ask you, Ms. Kaye, as a young politician like you, and in charging of a very important department, if you have a young person standing right in front of you today who really wants to get into politics, what kind of advice would you give it to him or her?
The first piece is to be true to who you are. My experience of those people, they come in from young ages, but also whatever age you come into politics, if you don't know who you are, because you're constantly tested on every single possible issue, then you will fail because people will not follow you because they will know that you're not able to make those decisions. So I meet young people who are 18 years old, who have a very strong sense, who would make fantastic parliamentarians. I meet people in their 60s that don't have a good sense of who they are. That's the first thing. The second thing is get involved. So even if you don't know whether you're left or right, go and help out with the youth wing of a political party and find out, shadow an MP. I get involved with a number of young people and offer them the opportunity to see what it's like. And then I think finally, just do it. We live in one of the greatest countries in the world. We are a very free country. We don't have, like some other countries, huge cost to stand for office. And whether it's at the local board level or the council level, put yourself up.
I thank you, Minister, for coming to this program. Thank you, Dr. Yang Jian.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
You're
Tony.
welcome.
同时呢，也感谢中文县区报对这个节目的支持。咱们下周再见。
再见。
Thank you.
再见。